This comes from Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 14, and chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. He said to his people,
Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land.
Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said,
I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush did not burn up.
When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush,
Moses, Moses.
And he said,
Here I am.
Then he said,
Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground.
He said further,
I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.
And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said,
I have observed the misery of the people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmakers. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cities of Israel, the cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. So come, I will send you to the Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt.
The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Good morning. Great to see all of you up here this morning. I've got something in my pocket I want to show you. Who knows what this is? Raise your hand if you have one of these. Good. Okay, I was worried there for a second. So, I have a phone here, and through this phone I can talk to anyone in the world, right? Pretty much, if I know their number. Or sometimes I could just dial a random number and maybe call someone. If they pick up, I can chat and say, hey, what's up? Find out where they are. Well, you know whose number I don't have? Well, I don't have yours, or yours. I don't have all your numbers, but the person whose number I really don't have is I don't have God's number. So hoping that someone here could help me with God's number. Anyone have God's number? I'm ready to put it in my phone. Do you know it? No? Anyone have a guess? Start with a 4? 3? Do I do 1-800-CALL-GOD? I say, I don't know. So how do we get in contact with God if he doesn't have a phone number? Oh, we go see him, right? Where does he live? Where does he live? Where? In heaven? So if I want to see God, I have to go to heaven. How do I get to heaven? I'm afraid to ask. Isn't there a way that we can talk to God and see God here while we're here? Well, I have some friends who help me realize that God is here on this earth with us. So I see 2 girls right here wearing their Luther Crest Bible Camp shirts. How many of you went to Luther Crest or were here for the day camp or the VBS? Raise your hand. Awesome. Because those of you who went to camp or were here when the counselors came, they talked about God's everlasting love and that God still speaks to us and God shows us that he loves us every single day in all sorts of creative ways. But one of the main ways that God shows us that he loves us is he sends us each other to help each other out, right? So if someone's having a bad day, God can send a friend, and we can be that friend that God sends. Or if someone needs help with something, God can send us to go help that person. So that's how God shows us that he loves us. That's how we know that God is still speaking to us and still with us today. A little while later in the service, I'm going to call up those of you who know the song, I've Been Redeemed, if you learned it at Luther Crest or here at day camp. So if you know that song, come forward, and we're going to sing it nice and loud, okay? But for now, you can go back to your seats. I want you to remember that even though we don't have God's phone number, we don't know exactly where God lives, God is still here on this earth, and he's still speaking to us and talking to us by using each other. So God uses us to talk to other people, to help other people. Sound good?
The Holy Gospel according to Mark, the 12th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. This reading is on page 42 in the New Testament. Jesus said, "And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the story about the bush, how God said to Moses, 'I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' He is God not of the dead, but of the living." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated.
Well, I learned in English class in high school that every good speech should start off with a good attention grabber, something to get people's attention up here, get them looking up here, and I think a good sermon is no exception. So let's see, get some attention. Okay, I've got it. Doesn't the sanctuary look beautiful? The liturgical environment team worked so hard on Friday getting things prepared, so okay, yeah, that looks good. Let's see. Get some nice fire right here. All right, it's time for audience participation. How long do you think it would take for these three beautiful decorations up here to be fully engulfed in flame? Price is Right rules, so you can't go over, you have to be below or right on. So how long? What do we think? Maybe a few minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, 2 seconds? Should we try? No? I think we'll save that for the late show. We'll save that for the 11 o'clock service. So we heard a varying answers. 5 seconds, 5 minutes. Well, in our story today, we have Moses who comes across this burning bush. And he stares at it long enough to realize that it's not being consumed by the fire. And if you notice, if you want to open it up to Exodus chapter 3 on page 46 in your pew Bibles, Moses says, "This is strange. I will go over and see why the bush isn't burning up." So he saw that the bush was not being consumed by the fire. It wasn't until Moses approaches the burning bush that all of a sudden he hears God's voice, and God starts speaking to Moses. During my week of reading about this text and reading some commentaries, I heard someone say that the burning bush was not a miracle, but it was a test. So, I mean, it sounds like a miracle to me, but how it was a test was because God was seeing if someone would pay attention long enough to notice what was going on. You can see a bush on fire, but it takes someone to stop and look, maybe for even 5 seconds, maybe for as long as 5 minutes to go, this bush isn't being consumed by the flame. What's going on here? I'm going to go take a closer look. When Moses approaches the burning bush, that's when God speaks to him. So we're going to do some more audience participation. How many of you have a cell phone? Does that cell phone have internet and apps and games to distract you? Yeah. How about a TV in your house? More than one TV? How about a DVR so you can record your shows and watch them later and skip the commercials and just get down to business? Yeah. How about a computer at home? And a laptop, maybe? It's portable. You can take your computer with you everywhere you go. How many of you have a schedule in summer 2016 that's already seems to be filling up? Maybe, yeah? That far ahead. So, with all these distractions and all these, our lives filling up so fast, we wonder why it's so hard to hear the voice of God. We move so fast, we fill our lives up, and just maybe there are burning bushes all around us, waiting for us to take a closer look. We're just moving so fast and our lives are so busy that we miss it. So in our reading today, we obviously come across Moses who takes the time to take a closer look about what's going on. And it's only when Moses takes that little break and decides to take a closer look, that's when God speaks. So what does God say to Moses? Well, in verse 7, we have God saying, I have seen how my people are suffering. I have heard them beg for my help. I feel sorry for them. I have come down to rescue them for the Egyptians. I'll bring them out of the country. So God knows what's going on. He hears the cries. He can identify. He knows they're being oppressed. And then God goes in for the, I will send you, Moses. So God isn't just going to simply do it and boom, the problem's fixed. God is sending Moses straight to Pharaoh, the person who is oppressing God's people. God is sending Moses. Well, Moses, I like it. He's a down-to-earth guy, and after God says this, Moses goes, but who am I? Who am I to do this? And then Moses goes on to say, if I'm going to do this, and you're making me go over to Pharaoh and tell him to release the people, I'm going to have to tell him who sent me. I'm going to have to give him your name. So here we have maybe one of the most mysterious parts of the Bible when God says, I am. Oh, that cleared things up. Perfect. Thanks, God. I am. That's not a name. God goes on to say, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So why does God bring up Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? Well, God had a covenant with all three of those guys. And it's important to note that it's a covenant, not a contract. Because with a contract, if someone doesn't hold up their end of the contract is broken. Right? Any side can break a contract, it doesn't matter. You fail to uphold your end of the contract, boom, the contract is broken, it's done. So God doesn't have a contract, he made a covenant with these three men. And it's important to note the difference because with a covenant, God will never break his end of the covenant. We as humans, we fail all the time, we can't uphold our side, but that doesn't mean that it's a broken covenant. God will still uphold his side. God will always keep his promise. I want you to note that God still has a covenant with each and every single one of us today. Now, it may not be the same covenant that God had with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that we will have a great nation and many descendants and will be brought to the promised land, but God has a covenant for us. And do you know what that covenant is? God said it when he was speaking to Moses. The covenant is that God hears our cries. God can identify with our suffering. God knows when we're being oppressed. And God will deliver. God will send help. That is God's promise. This summer we had about 50 students attend Crest Bible Camp in Alexandria. About 70 students here at church for day camp and VBS. And 27 students attend the ELCA National Youth Gathering in Detroit. So those 27 students over here in their shirts. If you have a chance this morning, I encourage you to walk down the hallway, down to Peace Hall, and take a look at the bulletin board. There's a lot of pictures put up of what the students have been doing in this summer. It may be kind of fun for you to take a little look down there and see what they've been up to, and talk to some of these students this morning and ask them, what did you do this summer? What was the best part of your summer? Would you do it again? Engage them, ask them some questions. So what do these students that were busy this summer, what do they have in common? What do they have in common with Moses, or what do they have to do with this reading? Each and every single one of these students had an encounter with I am. Each of them heard God speaking. Some of them were even sent out in the name of God to do some work. So I'm going to call Mara up, and she's going to tell us just a little bit about what she did this summer at the ELCA National Youth Gathering in Detroit. And then if Justin is here, Justin can come forward too, but I don't know if he is here. Oh, here he comes. Awesome. So go for it.
Okay, so when I first heard that the trip in the summer was going to be in Detroit, I didn't really know what to think. Detroit wasn't really at the very top of my list of places that I was dying to visit. Well, the sermon today talked about how God heard the cries of his people, and I think that God definitely heard the cries of the people in Detroit. So he called not only us here at Bethlehem, but 30,000 youth from around the nation to serve. We not only did service work, but in general, we brought light to a city that was kind of starting to lose it, which was really cool. It ended up being a really great experience, and I was really glad that I went.
Luther Crest, there was a couple things that there is fun there. They have lots of games, lots of studying in the Bible, and you have lots of fun and cabin friends. And that's what I like about Luther Crest.
Awesome. Thanks, you two. So we can see that God called these students to different places. Justin felt the call to Luther Crest, and there he was able to experience some fun outside of God's creation. He got to study God's word, and he got to meet some new friends. And Mara and these other students were called to Detroit to do some service work, to worship with each other, not to mention just the economic boom that was brought to that city. Something also that these students have in common is that they had an experience with God, with the divine, think, God's work, our hands. We're doing God's work through our hands. There's an old Celtic term used to describe places like this in the world where the distances between heaven and the divine are pretty short. There's not much blocking it. And the term they use is thin places. So very thin places. And it's such a fascinating idea to me because thin places can be different for everyone. What's a thin place for you might not be a thin place for me, but that doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. A thin place could be a very tranquil place, a very quiet place, a beautiful one, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one of those things either. What a thin place does is it relaxes us, it causes us to slow down and take a look, and it transforms us. And more accurately, maybe it unmasks us. It takes those blinders off. It takes the blinders of our cell phones and our TVs and our busy schedules. And the thin places allows us to see the divine. So for me, my thin place is Luther Crest Bible Camp. And it was my second summer there, the summer of 2009. And I'll never forget this moment. We were sitting down by the lake, and we just finished campfire worship. So we had a little worship, we're singing songs. And the sun was setting, the lake was still, just beautiful reflections on the lake. Loons were calling, just beautiful to be outside, and the fire was going down to embers, and we were just kind of sitting there after worship. And I saw something that to this day I haven't forgot about, and I promise I never will forget about. So I brought it with me here today. Let me show you what I saw. This is what I saw. Okay? Not really a burning bush moment, huh? This is what I saw. Well, I'll tell you why this is important to me. And I asked my wife, and she said it was okay, but this is the first outfit that I ever saw my wife wear at Luther Crest Bible Camp. She came walking down from the top of the hill. We were all just finishing campfire, and she wasn't there the whole day, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, who's this girl coming in? I was just slowing down, paying attention. I saw her walking down, and she's the only person that I can ever tell you what they were wearing the first time I saw them. The only person. No one else. So sorry if you thought we were best friends and I thought I could tell you what you were wearing, but that's not the case. So in that moment, I was slowed down enough. I was aware of my surroundings. We just had a great worship, and I remembered what she was wearing. So obviously, she's a very important person in my life. God gave me the gift of her, and through her, we have two beautiful children, in Penny and Trigvi. So Luther Crest is definitely a thin place for me and my family, because not only did Molly and I meet there and work there, but that's where we were married, and both of our kids were baptized there. So it's a thin place for our family. It's not thin just because of meeting my wife there and the special moments for our family, but also because of the amazing transformational work that goes on there every week. Molly and I, as counselors, we saw it every single week. We saw what God was doing and how he was working through not only us, the staff, but also the kids that were coming. Our lives could be changed by the students who were showing up each week. I want you to think about, where's a thin place for you? What is a thin place for you? Where is the divine in this earthly world? Maybe almost touch. Come very close. Maybe you've had a similar camp experience where something stood out to you. Maybe you had a meaningful service experience that you felt God was speaking to you, or God was working through you, or God was sending you to answer the cries of people. In the reading today, we have Moses, who takes the time, and he notices that the ground was holy because God was there. God's presence made it holy. But the bush didn't suddenly catch on fire. It's been burning the whole time, and Moses is just simply moving slowly enough to see it. And when he does, he takes off his sandals, not because he just realizes that the ground just became holy, but because the ground has been holy all along, and he just found that out. So efficiency is not God's goal in your life, neither is speed or busyness or how many things you can get done in one day. God's goal for your life is slowing down, because slowing down leads to paying attention, which leads to seeing, which listens to hearing God's voice. And that's something huge in our lives. So my invitation for all of you today is, in every conversation, every moment, every interaction, every event, just slow down a little bit. Try to be unmasked by a thin place, by not all the distractions that you have around you, and see if God's voice is there, see if God is speaking to you. God says to Moses that this is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. So God is still the I am. He's not the I was. He's not the I occasionally. He's the I am. He currently is, and that's his name forever and for all generations. In our gospel reading, we hear that God is not a God of the dead, but he is a God of the living. So when we think about doing God's work with our hands, that is the God of the living. We are out there, maybe by our work, maybe through our hands doing God's work, maybe we're letting others see a thin place in their lives, so we're bringing God's voice to them. So my wish for you this morning is, may you be the kind of community that is so committed to being God's hands and feet and voice that when people see you, they can't help but slow down and take notice. And may you be a burning bush that is not consumed by the busyness of this world, and may you shine bright for God. Amen.